This episode is brought to you by Americas Rehab Campus. Get on the road to recovery with the best rehab in beautiful Arizona. Dial 1-833-272-7342. That's 1-833-ARC-REHAB.
Ladies and gentlemen, you are now tuned in to TheARCast.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you again for listening to another episode of TheARCast. My name is Buddha. I'm sitting here with my co-host, Mr. Vance Johnson. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing great, brother. How you doing?
Oh, man, I'm feeling blessed today. I'm feeling really blessed today. But today, guys, we have a very, very special episode for you. I got two gentlemen sitting next to me. You already know Mr. Matt Shetler. Matt, how you feeling this morning?
Oh, I'm great. Glad to be here.
All right. But today is a very special episode, like I said, because this is our first official Father's Day episode. Who did you bring with us? Who's our special guest today, Matt?
As I know him, Pops, but everybody else knows him as Mike Shetler.
Mike Shetler.
Right.
Good morning.
Happy Father's Day.
Thank you. How are you guys doing?
All right.
Great.
Happy Father's Day to all of you.
Absolutely. All you
Absolutely.
dads.
Man, this is awesome. I've heard some amazing things about you. I know they're all true. You have an amazing son here.
Yes.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about your story, Mike? Where did you grow up?
I grew up in northeastern Ohio on a farm and went in the service out of high school and then became a police officer at a young age and did that through retirement, essentially.
Thank you for your service, brother.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And where were you as a police officer?
Well, I was kind of all over the place. So Matt had the opportunity of moving a lot.
Yeah.
I started in law enforcement in northeastern Ohio, and then we moved to Houston, and I was a detective sergeant.
Wow.
Then from Texas, we moved to southeast Florida. I was an assistant chief of police for a small city in southeast Florida and was attached to the Governor's Council on Organized Crime. That was about 1980.
Okay.
And if you're all familiar with what was going on in Florida at that time, cocaine and pot and you name it were coming in by the boatloads and the plane loads.
Scarface.
Yeah, basically that was what was portrayed anyway at the time. But there was not enough law enforcement on the state level or in many of the municipalities, essentially, like Miami and Tampa, and all the municipalities had what they called an OCB unit, which was an organized crime bureau. Mm-hmm. So back in 1980, the governor at the time created the Governor's Council on Organized Crime and Narcotics, put one of the state attorneys, which is the same thing as a district attorney here in Arizona, in charge. And then they got loaner officers from municipality police departments and sheriff's departments around the state. So I worked with another individual, and we worked through a grand jury, and we worked all over the state of Florida, working narcotics and organized crime.
Wow.
So I did that, and then mid-'80s, we moved to Colorado. I was director of public safety for an Indian tribe in Colorado, New Mexico, and Utah. Then I ran for sheriff in the county that we lived in and got elected sheriff and decided politics weren't my bag. So we ended up, my last law enforcement job was in Dutch Harbor on Alaska. So it's out on the Aleutian chain in Alaska. It's where the North Pacific and the Bering Sea come together. If you ever watch Discovery Channel, you'll see Deadliest Catch, crab fishing. That's based out of Dutch Harbor on Alaska.
Wow.
So, and that was probably the best job as a policeman anybody could ever have because it was truly the Wild West. More stabbings, and to give you an example, there was 3,500 permanent residents in the city. There were more stabbings every year in Dutch than there were in Anchorage, which was 300,000 population.
Wow.
And, along with drugs and rapes and lots of violence, but we had Russians, Chinese, Japanese, Koreans, Poles, all sailors coming through. So on any given day, we had 20 to 30,000 transient fishermen in town. So everybody had a knife.
Yeah, big mixture of people.
Yeah, everybody had a knife.
I've met a lot of people that were in services that represented our country, and also the men that were police officers. And I just say thanks to all of them, because if it wasn't for you guys, we wouldn't be in this free country that we're in.
It's a hard job, but it's a much harder job now than it was back when I was.
You're answering my question I was going to ask, because do they deal with mental health issues? Because a lot of times you guys have to worry about your own lives because people are trying to take you guys out.
Mental health is the biggest problem we have in this country right now.
It is.
And whether you associate it with drug abuse or alcohol abuse or just people that...
Growing up.
Yeah, people that have developmental issues. Mm-hmm. It's, and I don't mean to try to take over a conversation, but it's where our mass shootings come from, our true mass shootings. I don't mean gang violence like we were talking about, Vance, but our mass shootings come from mental illness.
Illness, yes.
And it doesn't appear to me to be anything that we're dealing with as a country.
Right.
You know,
Exactly. And it's not new.
No, it's been around forever.
Forever.
But it's getting worse
Yes,
because
it is getting worse.
society's becoming more dysfunctional. You know, families, all the things that kept people in check and helped people.
Yes, sir.
Churches.
Yep. And it's biblical because it said these are the last days.
Yeah.
Wow. So what were your first like active years? What years were you first active with drug enforcement?
Drug enforcement, 76.
Okay.
And on through about late 83.
Wow. So you were right there at the beginning when drug crisis in the United States was getting pretty bad, right?
It wasn't as violent before that as it became. And now it's tenfold worse.
Yeah.
It used to be if there was drug violence, it was either a deal went bad or somebody was moving in on someone else's territory, or in effect, someone came from the East Coast, the Northeast Coast, Jersey,
Yep.
down to Florida and decided they were going to take off a boat or something like that, that some bad guys were bringing dope in. So those types of things cause killings.
And I grew up in Jersey, so
Yeah.
I
So
exactly
you know
what you're
exactly what I
talking- I
mean.
know right where you are.
But now it's just indiscriminate, you know,
Yeah.
kids killing kids, and it wasn't kids killing kids back then.
By the way, and drugs weren't legal back then the way they are today.
no, not at all.
And the violence is worse today.
Yes.
Much worse.
Makes sense.
Much worse.
You see, like for me, one of the biggest things that I remember growing up was when the crack epidemic hit. And I don't know if it was the same out in Miami or in those places like it was in New York, but I know it hit really bad in New York. Were you around that time?
You're right across the street.
Yeah.
In Jersey, yeah.
Wow. And how did that affect Miami as well?
Yeah, you know, crack was kind of an emerging drug. Back at that time, it was more crystal meth, coke, as Matt and I were talking about earlier. One of the myths is always, this is not addictive.
Yeah, that's a myth.
You know, and I can remember working, because coke was a big thing back then. You know, we were taking keys and stuff of coke off. One of the big things was you talk to somebody and go, well, you know, you can use this all the time. It's not addictive.
Right.
And you look around and you go, well, that guy used to be a successful attorney and had a nice house over on the water and driving nice cars and nice and he's living in a dirtbag apartment right now with 9 other guys.
Yeah.
And he's telling me that cocaine's not addictive?
Yeah, it makes a whole lot of sense.
And he's reminding me of my career when I used to actually take different types of drugs because of the injuries that I had. And then after my career, I took those drugs and added more drugs because it was addictive.
Sure.
Yep.
There's always a myth that this isn't addictive. This new drug is not addictive. And for
They all
goodness sakes, they all are.
They all are.
And depending upon who you are mentally, they can be more addictive because obviously some people have addictive personalities on top of it.
Yep.
So you were involved in this field for a long time. I'm sure you dealt with some of the worst, you know, being out there.
I saw some horrible things that when you're doing those things, you see things that you can't imagine people can do to people. Right. And that's what lets you know that dogs don't go to other dogs and skin them out and burn them with acid and, you know, tie them up with wire. And
I like that.
only people do those things.
They just
you
chase
know?
each other out of the way.
Yeah. You know, people do those things to people. I mean, I've seen guys tied up with piano wire, left in a car, the car doused with gas, and the car lit. Other guys, I saw one, and I can't tell you where. I won't tell you where, but I saw some video where some guys took 3 guys, took them out into an orchard, tied them to trees, beat them with baseball bats, and one day after another, and videoed it.
Wow.
Videoed it. Wow. And one day after another, killed one guy, then made the other guys dig the grave, and you know, on and on torture, and then send the video back to where they came from to show, you know, you can send all the people down you want to. This is what's going to happen to them if you want to step into our realm, basically. So there are horrible things that people do to people, and it's certainly not getting any better. It's just getting worse.
Yeah, absolutely. And we were talking about that a little bit before the episode, you know, how regardless of what field you're in, especially working in mental health, working with police, military, anything, like you see some things sometimes that it's not easy to take home with you. So as a father myself, I know I look at my babies, my son and my daughter, and I think, man, I want the best for them. I want them to do good. I want them to live the right way. With that said, you know, growing up with your kids, how many kids were you raising at this time?
There was just, at first there was Matt, and I had a stepson that was older than Matt, so Matt's half brother.
Okay.
And Sean was 6 years older than you, Matt?
4.5.
4.5 years older than you. And then Sean's mom and I got divorced. Matt came with me. I got remarried to another lady, and then her and I had Matt's sister, Michelle. So it was always just two kids, and obviously Matt was my first. So
Lucky you.
I was lucky.
What you just now said, I need to tell those dads that just heard that. If anything happens in your relationship, you take your son with you so you can raise him.
Sure.
Yeah. I mean, that was unheard of back then, you know.
It
and
was.
I wouldn't have it any other way. I've had the greatest dad ever.
Oh,
You know,
absolutely.
there's nothing I could do or say to repay what this man has done for me.
Yeah.
You know, the love and everything that's been showed. You know, back then it was the kids went with the mom. You know, fortunately and lucky for me, mom didn't want me. Dad did.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah. Lucky you.
No, exactly.
Yeah,
That's the
absolutely.
way I look at it.
And you guys have always been super close?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. And what about when you started getting older, the teenagers? That's what I worry about. When the teenagers, were you guys always?
Well, I'll let Dad tell his side, and then I'll respond to it how I felt, maybe.
Well, my side is up until about 17 years old, Matt was probably the most well-behaved. Not that he didn't screw up and make some bad decisions along the way, because he did.
All teenagers do.
Yeah, but as an individual, he was very responsible. He was, to me, the perfect son. If I looked at Matt and said, you know, you've really disappointed me, I could just see it killed him. You know, and then sometime in his senior year, he started drinking and obviously using drugs, which even with my background kind of turned a blind eye, because it's that he's been around policemen all his life. I've taken him into jails and shown him what happens, you know, where you end up, the things that can occur. And, you know, there's that deny as a parent that we sometimes go through. And I did do that.
Yeah.
And Matt went from being the most responsible, loving son to an incredibly irresponsible, loving son. You know, is what I would say. So it was like a switch flipped, and even though we loved each other very dearly, it at times became hard to tolerate being around.
Was it because of the generations that he was hanging around back in those days? Or?
You know, he had, his friends were good friends. They were, and they came from good families. I don't know what all was going on. I don't know exactly who Matt was hanging around with that was presenting the other options for him. But as a good friend of mine's mother used to say, tell me who you're with, I'll tell you what you are.
Wow.
And I guess, again, part of that deniability, I never really pushed hard to make Matt stand up and be the person that he should not have been. Yeah. I always relied on him and his common sense to make good decisions. And, you know, for quite a few years there, common sense and good decisions, because of alcohol and drug abuse, just destroyed his life. Yeah. For 20 plus years.
Did you drink and do drugs back in the day? Did he see that at home, or you weren't that guy?
I drank beer. Yeah, I mean, I drank, no question. And you know, I was in a law enforcement environment, so we had people all the time at the house. Guys that worked for me, women that worked for me and stuff would come to the house and have dinner, or we'd just sit and watch a football game or something and drink beer.
But the thing is that he says drink beer. Never, ever have I seen him sloppy drunk or even knew that he was drunk, right? So when he's saying drinking beer, they're having a few beers, not sitting there killing cases and cases and cases, right? Yeah. So it wasn't like, you know, I learned drinking from my dad.
You answered my next question. That's where I was going, because I was wanting fathers to hear that just because you only drink beer doesn't mean that your kid around you is necessarily going to be that alcoholic, but that can happen even if you don't grow up around that.
Looking back now, I had and I still do, a very addictive personality, right?
We all do.
I think at around 13, 14 years old, I started questioning why my egg donor didn't want me, even though I was grateful that I was with Dad, right? That came into play. Yeah. And then all of a sudden here you're going camping and you're having a couple drinks of beer and you forget all those things and you feel numb and you don't have to sit and feel that anymore. So that became big, right? Like he said, around 17, 18, my brother passed away when I was 19. And I went numb after that. Yeah. Putting stuff in my body, anything I could find, a trash can.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Absolutely. You know, so all that did was numb all the stuff that I didn't want to have to deal with.
Yeah.
And it got worse and worse and worse. Problem for me is that it never really affected my jobs, right? I was an IT guy for like 14 years, 19 to 30 something. And it didn't, my drug use and drinking, it affected my job, but because I was so good at my job, my work would turn a blind eye to it.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, Matt had a great work ethic.
Yeah.
Great work ethic.
My boss one time in Philadelphia, I got arrested out there. He used the company card to bail me out of jail. You know, the company American Express.
really? Wow.
Yeah, to start a 3-week trip. So there are some things that came out of it that I still had, and I still have a great work ethic, right? But it was just I couldn't stop after the years and the years, right, of using, and I didn't really know how to do anything being sober, right? And Dad would always be like, well, why can't you just quit? Just stop taking it. Yeah. Just stop. And I'm like, oh, you don't understand.
Right.
For
all those believers that are listening to this, I want you to hear how the desires of the flesh is a real big deal.
Absolutely.
Yes.
It's not brain power,
Right.
It's not just saying, hey, I'm just not going to use today. It didn't work that way for me. Because I went to bed every night or woke up every morning and I didn't want to use. I had to use to continue to keep going, right?
Exactly, because of those feelings.
And then bad decision after bad decision, it just mounts up and mounts up and mounts up. And, then you start living with a lot of guilt and shame. And like Dad was saying earlier, it's like I would rather him just come home and whoop my ass than to sit me down and tell me how bad I disappointed him. That used to it still does to this day. I haven't had that conversation in quite a long time, but I'm always like not wanting to disappoint my dad. Right? Physical pain but that's like a mental pain I don't want to deal with.
Yeah.
And I always be like sitting there and he'd be telling me that and I'm just thinking, can't you just whoop my ass? Like, please.
You wouldn't have wanted that either.
No.
So it's, growing up around law enforcement, it was, hey son, you're going to end up like this guy over here if you, take drugs. And I remember in the mid 80s, we're living in Colorado and I had to walk home through this park with a lot of vagrants and stuff. And I used to be scared out of my mind that someone was going to force me to take drugs or drink when I'm walking home through the park.
Wow.
Yeah. And then here, a couple years later down the road, I'm just freely taking anything and everything, and going against all of my personal morals and things that I set up for myself and the way I was raised. And, it just continued. And it wasn't that I didn't love my dad, because I love my dad more than anything. He's always been there for me no matter what I've done. But easy way of putting it is Dad would say, son, you're coming to a fork in the road. If you go right, you're going to have everything you need in life.
Wow.
Won't ever worry about money, won't have heartache, all these things. And if you go left, you're going to have nothing but a world of hurt.
I like that.
I get to that fork in the road and be like, fuck him. I'm going to go left just because he said,
Go right.
Go right.
Yeah.
And I don't know what my problem was, but I did that for a long time. If I would have just been humble enough to take some advice from somebody who's gone through it and been there as well, not the drinking and the drugging part, but life, growing up as a man, right? We all, go through similar situations, but I didn't make it easy on myself,
You know what I noticed? He still doesn't wear a belt. That's probably why you didn't get a spanking.
But sports, I played sports. He had me in sports, from the time I was little. Dirt bikes, 3 years old on a little dirt bike. And here I am, dirt bike, but I can remember complaining, I got to wear a damn helmet,
As he ran into the tree.
Yeah.
Literally, as he ran into the tree. And then all of a sudden it was, man, am I glad I had a helmet.
Yes.
Those are the beginning stages of riding. I haven't hit a tree in years.
It's amazing to hear you talk like that, because I think, my babies are 8 and 10 years old, and my wife is amazing, bro. She keeps them right now they're in a mariachi camp. They do wrestling. My kids have done all this stuff. And my wife said that that's one of the biggest things that kept her away from trouble, was staying so busy, doing things that,
Yeah.
But I mean, it gets to that point where it's like, it doesn't matter how busy you keep your kids. It doesn't matter how much you try to steer them away from the wrong way. Sometimes just life happens.
They're still going to make their own decision, right? At the end of the day, all you can hope for is they make a good decision,
Well, that's what we were talking about earlier, though. It's, we live and die by our decisions.
Yes, sir.
And they really started about 8 or 10 years old, because that's where the foundation of what's right and wrong, you really do have an understanding. And you get that guilt when your parent comes up to you and goes, "Did you do that?" No, wasn't me. Well, so you're lying, because you know what you did was wrong.
Exactly.
Don't want to get in trouble.
You don't want to get in trouble. So obviously, if you know what's right and wrong, and as we go along, we try to make decisions that are good decisions from the time you're little. At some point, your life turns out to be much better, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, any of us could go to South Phoenix today, find a young white, black, Hispanic, Asian child who lives in a shitbox apartment with their mother, who's maybe a crack addict or whatever. And every day that kid walks to school, and they may be 10 years old, and they get beat up on the way to school. They get beat up at school. They get beat up when they go home to an empty apartment. And they got nothing to eat, and they sit down and they do their homework. They do everything they're supposed to do, and they excel as a student and as a person. And someday that kid is going to be an attorney or a doctor or something and be successful and be happy. We can also go to Scottsdale to one of the private schools and see some kid who's 16, 17 years old driving their new pickup truck or their Corvette or whatever mom and dad bought them. That kid's going to be a shitbag, and is now and will be one his entire or her entire life.
Yeah.
It's about the decisions that they make, not what they have from their parents other than love, but about the decisions they make as they go along. Yeah. And until us as a society starts holding people responsible for their decisions, good and bad, rewarding good ones, and actually punishing bad ones, we're going to continue to deteriorate as a society.
It's all about choice.
That's it. It's all about choice. It's no different than the people who are in your facility,
Right.
getting help. Somewhere along the line, they finally made a choice, a good choice. I don't want to be an addict. I don't want to be an alcoholic or whatever their problem might be, but they made a choice, and it's a good choice to get back into society in the way they should be and to get back into their family and live a life that they can enjoy instead of a life that is a burden every moment of every day.
Yeah, and they have to make a choice every day.
Yes, you do.
And the thing you learn is it's not all the outside things that make you happy, right? You have to be willing to make yourself happy internally. If you're not maker of your own happiness, you're going to be miserable. You can fill, with, materialistic stuff, women, all kinds of things, and then you're never happy, right?
Yep.
I was that guy.
Yeah, you've shared it plenty of times, and then it's like, what do? You medicate. You medicate by taking drugs and alcohol, anything you can do to not feel like Vance.
Exactly.
Right?
Yes.
Don't want to be you. And I think I've shared it before. It's like, even when I got sober, I couldn't stand facing the mirror, brushing my teeth to look at that person because I hated him. Absolutely despised who I was, the decisions I made, the way I've acted, all those things. It took me a long time.
You just now quoted Jesus, because guess what he said? Unless you hate your life, you won't have a new life.
Yeah.
And it's absolutely true. A chemical dependence. I mean, I look at my dad. If you're listening, Pops, I love you. I hope you're out there listening. When my dad was in his addiction, he was the sweetest, most kindest man in the world, But when he was using, he was a completely different person. And a chemical dependence has got to be a powerful one when people can choose that over their kids or choose it over their families and stuff, So we do need to pray for people, and we need to just continue to keep, just helping. Because it takes guts, in my opinion, to walk through that front door and realize, like, you know what, man, I'm tired of living like this. I'm tired of feeling like this.
Amen.
And coming through this program and making that change, it says a lot about their character as well.
It does. And the fact of the matter is that, we don't think that my actions by me using or doing what I'm doing is affecting anybody, right? But like I heard Pop say earlier in the podcast, it was when I started making those decisions, he had a hard time being around me. Yeah. It's like I'm Debo from Friday, right? You see him coming, it's like, oh shit, here comes Debo. And it's sad because we're so selfish and self-centered when we're in our addiction that we don't see the ripple effect.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. You throw that rock in the water, we think we're that rock and that's it. Why do you care? I'm only affecting myself. Well, fact of the matter is I can't tell you how many times my dad had to track me down when he it seemed like every time he'd go overseas, he'd have to find me somewhere, right? Yeah. I'd be missing for weeks. The amount of sleep that this man, that he got deprived from, the feelings of, hey, am I going to get a call that my son's dead? things like that you don't think of, right? And here I am just out doing whatever I wanted to do because I was a selfish, self-centered piece of shit, right? I had kids. And I still chose to do what Matt wanted to do all the time. Didn't matter. Okay, so what? You guys go do your thing, and I might be back. I remember one time I got sent to the store to pick up a formula for my son. 3 weeks later, I come back in the door, and I'm getting yelled and screamed at because they didn't have the formula.
Oh, wow.
And then, okay, I'm going to head back to the store. No, the hell you aren't. But it's just things like that. You don't realize that it definitely affects people that love and care about you.
More than it's affecting you.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
And
Even if you end up killing yourself, you actually traumatize family members that are going to just go for generations because of what we did.
And to be honest, I've been there.
Yeah.
I felt like that after I got sober this last time in 2011, right? Yeah. Like I had a plan set at this house we were renting, and the other guys were supposed to be going to a CA convention at the Biltmore, and Zane talked me into going, wouldn't stop bugging me, but I had everything, and I didn't want to live anymore, right? And that changed everything for me. Yep. So definitely mental illness is part of it. It's, us lying and telling ourselves that we're no good. Everybody would be better off if I wasn't sitting here. Kids, parents, loved ones, wives, right? But that's not the truth. Our heads love to lie to us because that's the addiction part.
Yep. I was that dad.
Yep.
I put Dad through a lot of stuff, but he's always been there. We never really talked about this, but your views when you were busting, working undercover drug offenders and drug addicts and things like that, how has your view changed over the years compared to how when you were, newly working in the 70s and 80s? I know it has, but I just never have asked.
Well, sure. Obviously, when things hit home, where your son is an addict, it does change your whole view on what goes on. You recognize it's an illness and not just a choice that people are making. Now, it doesn't change my view on people who sell or are distributing illegal narcotics.
Yeah.
It changes my view, though, on the people who use and are addicted because they're the victims. And obviously, at this point in time, I recognize alcoholism and drug abuse are an illness where back when I was young, it was a choice, I guess is what I would say. The reason people use drugs is because they choose to. And I think you heard Matt say earlier, I would say, why the hell don't you just quit? Just stop doing what you're doing. Never understanding or recognizing that it had gone past just using.
Yeah.
He was sick. He was ill. And he needed a program, truly needed a program to help him stop and get well. Thank God Matt got a program. And, it was not an elaborate program. It was a program that allowed him, though, to break that cycle that he had in his life. And, the things that you guys do here is much better than anything that Matt went through 11, 12 years ago. But it was either going to be that or death for Matt.
Yeah.
I mean, no question. And, he's right. When we'd travel and stuff, the one thing I could do was try to keep my finger at least on, if I talked to him today,
Yeah.
I knew he was still alive. When you couldn't talk to him, couldn't reach out to him, couldn't find him, didn't matter if you're 5 miles away or 10,000 miles away. Your heart hurts, your brain hurts.
Yeah.
Because, your son, something's happened is what you always think. Something's happened to him, and, I'm not going to see him again unless I see him in a box or something is what you would think.
Yeah.
When he was speaking, actually, I was watching you listen to him, and I saw an emotion inside of you that showed because you cared so much about your son. The position that you had made you care about the people that you had to go deal with that were struggling out there when you were in the office position that you were in.
Yeah. Again, it was...
you wanted to help those people rather than just put them in jail. You wanted to help them.
That's it. You do. And contrary to what society is teaching people now about policemen, you sure as hell don't take a job for the money. The most I ever made as a policeman was as director of public safety up in Dutch Harbor. I think I made $70-some thousand a year. That was the most. I didn't do it, and nobody that worked for me did it. Right. No matter where we were at for the money, because most of the time we made $15,000, $18,000. I started making $6,000 a year, $500 a month, working 6 days a week. And so you're not doing it for the money. You didn't do it then, and nobody's getting rich being a policeman now, being an honest policeman.
Exactly. Yeah.
Now, I'm going to say, there's that percentage of people that aren't honest as well, even in law enforcement, that shouldn't be cops, and they're getting rich. But generally speaking, people become firemen, people become policemen, people that work, in hospitals. Most of the time people are there because they really want to help society.
And you know what, guys, I have to elaborate on that because you're 100% correct. Because you know how many times I've been pulled over by cops since I was a teenager? Hundreds of times.
Sure.
But guess what? I just always respected them, and so nothing ended up happening except for me either getting a ticket or getting arrested.
I'm retired, and I get stopped, and I keep my hands on the top of the steering wheel. I shut the car off. I put the windows down. I sit and look forward, straight ahead. If it's dark, I turn the dome light on in the car, and the officer comes up, and I'm still sitting there looking straight ahead, and they go, "Good evening, officer." Can I help you?
You just reminded me of me getting pulled over out in California when I went to go after and I was actually going to try to kill. He's my attorney that was representing me with Denver Broncos for my, what do they call that when you get paid?
Contract?
An accountant?
My contract.
Oh, contract.
Yeah, he was my contract attorney. But he ended up ripping me off, and so I was going to go out there and try to kill that guy. And so I was going about 165 miles an hour in one of my Corvettes, and I got pulled over by a cop. First it was a helicopter, then the cop pulled me over. And when you said you put your hands up, you reminded me, I put my hands up.
Oh, yeah.
And I rolled the window down, and the very thing that came out of your mouth, "How you doing, sir?" That's the very thing I said.
Yeah.
And so he ended up finding out who I was, and he said, "Mr. Johnson, because you were a nice guy, I'm going to escort you back down to the Nevada state borderline, and you can't come back to California for 3 years. Otherwise, you're going to face prison time."
Thank
By
you,
the way,
sir.
I went to college with Dan Reeves.
Oh, shit.
Oh, really?
I've never shared that part of my testimony
That's
before.
funny.
They were roommates in college.
The guy that pulled you over.
Yeah, the guy that pulled me over.
I have a question for you, and maybe you can give me some advice as a father. Thinking about that, hearing what you were saying about losing your brother, right? You're a single father. I don't know if you were single at this time, but how did you deal with that stress of knowing what was going on with your son, dealing with the loss of your son, and continuing to work? And how does that work?
Well, again, he was a stepson to me, and his mother and I had divorced. So she
took him.
took him.
Okay.
And at the time that Sean passed away, Sean was 25, probably 24 years old. He was in his master's degree at Ohio State University, and he had developed a bacterial infection on a climb in Nepal. Wow. And it had started in his leg, and then it was one of those bacterial infections that
Grew.
Yeah, basically laughed at antibiotics. They'd start him on antibiotics, and it wouldn't start clearing up, but it would stop its movement. And then after a few days on that particular antibiotic, it would start growing again. Yeah. And eventually it killed Sean, which was, that was obviously a heartbreak to me because although we weren't living together or anything anymore, he was still an important person to me in my life. But when he died, Matt went back, and, I think it brought Matt's mortality to him. I think it also created an issue, and correct me if I'm wrong, son, I think it created even a larger issue between he and his birth mother.
Yeah, I did.
Because
She would call once a year maybe just to see, hey, are you in jail? Things like that. And my brother, Sean, he, was her everything, right? And I was okay with it because Dad was what she was to Sean. I had Dad, which I felt like I got the best deal ever. So when he passed, she started calling me, a couple times a week, wanting all this stuff, and I basically told her to go pound dirt, right? Like, just because he's gone doesn't mean you're going to infringe on my life. You know what I mean? And she didn't like it.
So I think that created even more issues for Matt after his brother passed away because of the rife between he and his mom and those things, and probably pushed him even farther into drugs and alcohol to cover up pain. So, there's no advice that you can give for something like that. Bad things happen in families and bad things happen in friendships. And, at some point you have to understand how to deal with it to make yourself okay.
Without using
without using drugs and alcohol.
alcohol.
Yeah.
I don't understand it in the way you guys understand it, the use of drugs and alcohol. But it's like anything. It's an escape mechanism for whatever's going on in your life. And we're better off if we just face reality and deal with reality.
Yeah.
And not try to escape from it. Because when you escape from it, it's always just temporary.
Yeah.
Reality's always there for us. I mean, if it's after a shooting or something like, I mean, when it's all said and done, you still got to deal with that reality that you were just involved in. Yeah. And, it's all emotional. It's all hard. It's, as I said, and I've heard you guys say similar things. Every morning I get up, look at myself in the mirror, and make a decision. Am I going to shave or am I going to cut my throat today? Yeah. Do I like myself still, or am I just so disgusted with myself I shouldn't be here any longer? And thank God for 68 plus years I've shaved.
Right.
Right.
So hopefully I shave for another 10 or 15 years.
You just can't grow a full beard.
Yeah, I can't. It looks like hell.
Hopefully more than that, too, man. Wow.
You know.
Once you finally got sober, bro, like how did you guys' relationship turn after that?
Matt and my relationship, from my perspective, has always been good.
Yeah.
Matt's been a pain in the ass at times, but that's part of being a dad. Yep. And I'm sure I've been a pain in the ass to Matt at times, and that's part of being a son. We've always had a good, close relationship. Matt is always, as does his sister, Michelle. Both kids have always cared what I think. Not that they do what I think they should have done, but they care what I think. And I think both Matt and his sister Michelle want to be close, want to be loved, and want to love. The sobriety on Matt's part has just made it more clear, I think, for him. Mm-hmm. I've never had a doubt what I thought of my son, or who I thought my son could be. Always been proud of him, even when he was an addict.
Yes, sir.
I was always proud of him.
Guys, this is the real dad talking.
Yeah. It's my son.
And on the other side, when I got sober, it took me about a year, 2 years to kind of, when I first originally got sober in 2004, to start understanding what was really going on, getting my feelings in check. I remember I had the kids one day, we were watching Lion King, in the part where the dad dies. And the next thing I turn around and my oldest Rain, she's like, "Dad, why are you crying?" And I was like, I didn't know what was going on because my emotions, I was emotionless for a long time, right? Mm-hmm. And so that feeling, our relation, mine and Dad's relationship, I always looked up to him and loved him more than anything and always felt safe. But it was that I kept disappointing, right? So I would distance myself. But after I got sober, it was, son, I see you're doing this. You're doing a great, it was all these good things. And it just re-energized me into what it is I want to be and who I want to be. Because it takes work being a good person, right? There was never a rift. When I kept my distance, it was only because of the fact I didn't want to disappoint or him to see me the way I was. That's it. And I never had a doubt that, my father's loved me. Hands down. Never have I thought he didn't, even when he's been disappointed or upset. He's right. He's suggested a lot of good things, and I always seem to choose the opposite. Son, don't tattoo your hands. Son, don't do this. And it's like, I look at it now, and I'm like, those weren't big issues. I should have just listened, or done whatever. But at the end of the day, it doesn't make me who I am. What makes me who I am are my loyalty, my word, how I treat people. Being a better husband, being a better father, being a better son, being a better coworker, being a better boss. Like those things are all important to me, and those were all handed down by my dad.
I'm so glad this is ARCast, because what you're doing right now, brother, on this ARCast is talking about Father's Day.
Yeah,
Yes.
Father's Day.
And your dad is a godly dad, because even our godly dad cares about us, but he doesn't want us to do the wrong thing. And he's going to be there for us when we turn, just like your father was there for you.
And growing up, it's funny because a lot of my friends would come over and be like, "Your dad's great." And my dad's a big dude. He's 68. He's still a beast. But back, when I was in high school, he was an even bigger guy. And, we've seen him knock people out and things like that. So they'd go out of town. I'd have parties at the house, and I would just tell people, if shit gets broke, I'm telling them who did it. And nothing ever got broke, But they would come over, and every time I'd leave, my dad would say, "I love you, son. Give me a hug. I'd go over to my friends' houses, and not once, I can't think of one friend that I heard his father ever tell him he loved him or hugged him, saw it, right? The moms would, but not the dads.
That's why I said your dad's a godly dad.
And so for me, it was like, I was the most lucky son in the world. Looking back, we talked about this morning, me and my dad on the drive up. Yeah, there's a lot of things I did wrong, but there's a lot of things I did right too. And if I could go back and change anything, I wouldn't, because one little change could change where I'm sitting right this second. And where I'm sitting right this second is I love the person who I am. I love the people who are close to me. All those good things that you want. If you changed anything, something good or something bad, it could, definitely put me out of this chair. I couldn't be here today, right?
Yeah.
So you got to be willing to accept, hey, I won the Pulitzer Prize. And hey, yeah, I was a piece of shit lowlife who stole and did drugs and also, right? You got to accept the good and the bad to move on.
Well, this has been very special to see you guys here, to have you here. Like I said, I have my 2 babies and they're growing up, and I have that thought process of, man, like I want to stick around. I want to see them. I want to have those moments with them. So it's very nice to hear your guys' story and to see, like, we're all human beings. We all go through things, and to any of the fathers out there, this is your day, guys. This is your day. I hope you guys have a wonderful day. Before we finish up the episode or before we change anything up, I wanted just to see, maybe as a father, if you had any advice for any fathers, and then Matt, any advice you have, and then Vance, any advice you have to any of the fathers out there.
My advice is listen to Matt and his dad.
All right.
Mine would be never give up on your kids.
Never give up.
Wow, I love that.
For me, it's listen. As a father, listen. And that was one thing my dad did, is he would listen, but he also was fair and he was kind, and let your kids know that you're there and you'll always be there for them. There's no other better feeling than that.
Absolutely.
And that's what you can do, right, for those kids.
I wish I was a dad like your father was.
Oh, you're a great dad, Vance.
We all
so
grow
are you,
into
Buddha.
We all grow.
We're all
into
dads in here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
And I love what you said about listening. Melody, Michael, if you guys are out there, I love you guys very much. I want to thank you guys once again, for being here. I want to thank all the listeners for listening. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been another amazing, very, very special episode of the ARCast. Mike, I want to thank you for being here.
Happy Father's Day.
Matt,
Father's
Vance,
Day,
you guys are amazing. Happy Father's Day to each and every single one of you, and to everyone listening out there. Much love and God bless you guys. Have a beautiful day.
Thank you.
What's going on, everybody? This is Buddha from TheARCast, and I just wanted to thank you for checking out this week's episode. It means a lot, and if you could share it with a friend or a loved one, somebody you need in recovery, or maybe somebody who just needs that little bit of extra positivity in their life, we'd greatly appreciate it. If you would like to join us here on TheARCast, either in the studio live or online, hit us up. The links are down in the show notes of this episode, and on there, you can find direct links to our main website here at Americas Rehab Campus and all of our social media platforms. Follow us. We keep the posts positive and motivational, focused on recovery, health, and wellness. As you know, in this modern day and age, we need as much love as possible, y'all. And as always, if you or somebody you know is in need of substance abuse treatment, please don't hesitate to give us a call. We're open 24 hours a day, and our direct phone number is 1-833-272-7342. Once again, that phone number is 1-833-272-7342. I hope you all have a beautiful rest of your day. Much love and God bless. Peace.